Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And, Wes, much like last week, we are going to pull double duty in one episode this week because of the holiday on Thursday. So we will review the Packers' last game, also preview their next one. And, unfortunately, the review of the last one is another loss for the Packers, 27-17 on Thursday Night Football last week against the Tennessee Titans. The most disappointing thing being that the Packers were not able to build on a victory over the Dallas Cowboys a few days prior, and that 2 games in 5 days thing ended up being a 1-1 split at Lambeau Field, and the Packers still find themselves 3 games below 500 at 4-7 here heading into the home stretch.
Yeah, it was a maddening week in that I felt like those 4 or 5 days really encapsulated what has been the Packers' 2022 season. It wasn't a perfect game by any means against the Cowboys, but I liked how they dug deep. They rallied in the fourth quarter. You and I talked last week about the stat of 150-0 or whatever Dallas was,
right,
leading by 14 going in the fourth. The guys came through, and they played as well in terms of complementary football as they had all season. Then you switch it over to the Tennessee game, and it was the additive inverse of everything. They're not able to get the running game going. They win the turnover differential but aren't able to capitalize on that takeaway. And realistically, I think Matt LaFleur said it afterwards. I mean, Tennessee beat them in all 3 phases. And when you play well together as a team like Tennessee did, the Packers took away Derrick Henry. They contained him, but then Ryan Tannehill has his best passing game of the season. The Titans had more counter moves for what Green Bay did than the other way around, and unfortunately for the Packers, it meant loss number 7.
Yeah, and this was really the epitome of what we've been hearing for weeks, what we've been talking about for weeks with regard to complementary football. And I know some fans think that's just a catchphrase or whatever, but you look at how this Tennessee game unfolded, and it explains it, because complementary football, as I wrote in Insider Inbox, it's about controlling the flow of the game. It's when something good happens on one side of the ball, does the other side capitalize on it and keep you in control of the game? Or when something bad happens, does the other side of the ball stem the tide and get things going back in your direction? The way this game unfolded, the Packers get the 4th and 1 stop at the 5-yard line or inside the 5 when Tennessee's had the ball for 10 minutes, pounding the ball down the field in very small pieces with Derrick Henry, but they were moving the chains and controlling the football. But the Packers get the stop on 4th and 1 near the goal line, but then the offense goes 3 and out and has to punt from the back of the end zone, right? If you're playing complementary football, the offense seizes that momentum from the defensive stop and at least moves the football out, switches the field position back, hopefully even gets some points out of a drive like that. But the Packers get nothing. They punt the ball. Tennessee starts in positive territory and goes in and gets a touchdown before the end of the half anyway. That's Tennessee playing complementary football, because when their offense got stopped, their defense got the ball right back. And so the 4th and 1 stop almost becomes meaningless because Tennessee still gets a touchdown before half to go up 14-6. The fourth quarter is the other example. The Packers get an interception. The only turnover of the football game, right? Rasul Douglas intercepts Ryan Tannehill, who is having a fantastic night throwing the football. But then the Packers offensively can't do anything with it. They go 3 and out. They give the ball right back to Tennessee, and you're still down by 10 points. When that interception, you think, can swing things in your way, you get it to a 1-score game perhaps, and then who knows? Those are the things that were not happening against the Tennessee Titans, and they did happen against the Dallas Cowboys. After the interceptions, the Packers got touchdowns, all that. We talked about that last week. That's the definition of complementary football when it does and when it doesn't happen. And the Packers were sort of back into the way they were playing during the losing streak. What happened against Dallas didn't carry over.
Well, and then the second half in particular, I mean, you look at how that unfolded for Green Bay. I mean, they score some points in the third quarter.
Yeah, the offense started to find itself in the third quarter. Unfortunately, the defense was really, really struggling in the third quarter.
6 plays, 91-yard series for the defense giving up a touchdown. And then in the fourth quarter, the defense gets some stops, and now the offense is going 3 and out, going 4 and out. It's just been the tale of this season for Green Bay, and it was difficult when you kind of tried to prim and parse it afterwards, because as encouraging as that win was against the Cowboys, this one was probably on the opposite side of the spectrum in the discouraging category, because Tennessee just came in and they played their brand of football, and they are extremely good at what they do. And we talked about it all week long. But the disheartening thing for Green Bay is they did manage to get Tennessee in some third and long situations, and yet the Titans then found ways to convert on 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 7. And you just can't do that, because you already know you're going to give up first downs when it's 3rd and under 3, just with the way they play with Henry.
Yeah. But
when you're giving up those type of completions, it makes life a lot more difficult. And for the Packers' perspective, and it stinks, man, because like I've talked about over and over again, if the Packers were to be able to turn their season around, they had those 14 days, those 2 weeks to do it with the 3 games. And unfortunately, just with the way that this game laid out, as Matt LaFleur said afterwards, as everybody said afterwards, it now turns into a 1-game season here with still 6 left on the board.
Yeah, I mean, just the problems that you would hope could get sorted out and get solved in some way that have plagued this team through the course of the season just sort of reared their ugly head again. Offensively, Packers had 5 offensive possessions in this game in which they did not get a first down. They had 2 3-and-outs in the first half, and then 2 3-and-outs and a 4-and-out in the fourth quarter. 5 times getting the ball and not even be able to move the sticks once, that's not going to get the job done. We all know that. On the defensive side of the ball, the most disheartening thing, yes, the Packers sold out a little bit scheme-wise defensively to slow down Derrick Henry. And other than the one drive where they, in the second quarter, where the Titans kind of pounded away, but then the Packers eventually got the stop at the 5-yard line, Henry wasn't that much of a factor in this game. 3.1 yards per carry, you hold him to 80-plus yards. Packers would have taken that in a heartbeat if you had said those would be his statistics at the beginning of the game. But the coverage breakdowns in the secondary, it wasn't just that, yes, schematically they sold out to stop the run. It's going to leave you maybe a little vulnerable in the secondary, but not to the point that guys should be running free and wide open the way they were. There were coverage rules that were broken, coverage busts that were happening, and it wasn't just one receiver. It was receivers, tight ends, different guys running wide open and making things very easy for Ryan Tannehill to hit explosive plays of 30 yards or 35 yards that really were breaking the back of the defense. And that's what Matt LaFleur, I think, was most upset about, as much as he didn't like what he saw on offense, as I mentioned, with those 5 possessions. But he was most upset on Friday, the day after the game, with those coverage busts on defense, because you can't let receivers run wide open. It's just way too easy for the quarterback. And for that kind of stuff to be happening in the 11th game of the season, it's just it's inexcusable, frankly, and it's what cost the Packers this game.
Well, keep in mind, too, if you're not getting takeaways, which Tennessee's defense really didn't, other than, the fumble there with, was that with Amari Rodgers? I'm trying to remember. Not Amari Rodgers. I'm thinking back to the Cowboys game now.
There was Aaron Jones had fumbled, but the Packers recovered.
The Packers got it back.
The ball.
So that was the closest that they had gotten to it.
Right.
But if you're not able to generate the turnovers, it's about, do you cash in on your explosive plays? And that's ultimately where Tennessee won this game. I mean, for the most part, whether it's the Robert Woods coming free and having the big completion, the 42-yard screen to Derrick Henry, there just were moments there where, the way that Tennessee plays, and if you're going to have success against them, is you make them run as many plays as they have to, but don't rupture, right? Bend but don't break. That's the way teams have been successful against them this season. Well, when you rupture, that's where Tennessee can really hurt you. And, I tip my cap to Ryan Tannehill. Sometimes he takes a lot of grief from people, but the fact of the matter is he is the right quarterback for this offense and what they want to do. Again, everything makes sense. Defensively, Mike Vrabel, the unit that he's built, there's not a huge ton of names, as we've talked about, but you look at a guy like Tart, who I thought was exceptional in this game. You look at the guys that play hard together. They control the tempo of this game. They dictated the terms in which the Packers played offense. Now, Green Bay was able to get some explosives. I think Christian Watson continued to show what he can offer, but at the end of the day, when it came down to turning production into points, Tennessee was just better.
Yeah, we had talked heading into the game that since week 1, when Tennessee got their defense all run over by Saquon Barkley and the Giants, Tennessee had only allowed 59 rushing yards per game since week 1. What was the Packers' total? 56.
Yeah.
It played to the profile, right? Tennessee did what they did. You mentioned Tart up front. Packers had a real hard time blocking him. David Long, the inside linebacker, just attacks the line of scrimmage and attacks gaps, and he does that because he knows what those guys in front of him are going to do, and it's a very, very well coordinated run defense. The statistics of how they go about stopping the run are no joke. That is a defense that is really hard to run the football.
You're
against.
going to have mistakes when you crash that hard, but when you have that much talent, that much size, and that much length, and that much accountability, somebody else picks them up.
Right.
And that's where I really felt like, and we talked about it going into this game, this was going to be an opportunity, if it was going to happen, for Green Bay to, maybe this is where Aaron Jones creates a little bit of magic. Maybe you make somebody miss, and then that's your opportunity. Tennessee just played everything so well, and offensively, like we talked about, especially in that fourth quarter where there was that little brief glimmer of hope. They just couldn't string the drives together.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe the biggest glimmer of hope offensively in the fourth quarter was after Keyshawn Nixon had the nice punt return that put the ball across the 50. The clock, you're midway through the fourth quarter there, so you don't have a ton of time left, but it's a 10-point game, a touchdown and a field goal. You have a chance to get to overtime. You're starting in plus territory, a huge opportunity to make that a one-score game there, and then you tell your defense, all right, go out there, get us the ball one more time, and we'll try to tie this thing up. And the Packers go 4 and out, can't even get a first down. The flip side of it, again, when you talk the complementary football, like late in the third quarter, the Packers get the touchdown and the 2-point conversion to make it a 20-17 game. The Lambeau crowd under the lights, a little bit of snow falling, the all white uniforms, the crowd is into it there. It's 20-17. The defense goes back out on the field and it's like, all right, get the ball back and maybe Aaron Rodgers can put this team in the lead. 5 plays, 67 yards, I think, or 63 yards maybe. 5-play touchdown drive, and it's back to a 2-score game at 27-17. Defense didn't rise up when the offense looked like it was getting something going. Vice versa, it was the story of the game for sure. We need to turn the page, though, to the Philadelphia Eagles, and we'll do that after some sponsor business. SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub-in-a-bowl Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. All right, well, after the mini bye, the players get the weekend off, a little bit of time to rest and recover, both mentally and physically. It's another primetime game on the docket, Sunday Night Football from Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. The Packers will be taking on the top team in the NFC right now. The Philadelphia Eagles are 9-1. They lost their first game of the season just a couple of weeks ago on Monday Night Football at the Link. But then they bounced back and needing a late touchdown drive in Indianapolis to defeat the Colts. They got it, and of course, it was their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, on the quarterback draw, who gets that touchdown with less than 2 minutes to go, and the Eagles are able to survive a test from Indianapolis. And Jalen Hurts, Wes, I know we talked about Josh Allen heading into the Packers game in Buffalo. Patrick Mahomes is doing his thing, especially down the stretch in fourth quarters of games. But Jalen Hurts is making a bid to be the MVP of this league in 2022 with what he's doing.
Now, I understand outside of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, I don't really know what the impression is of Jalen Hurts nationally, but it's funny, for as much publicity as all those guys got from the 2020 NFL draft. Now, again, Hurts is an incredibly understated individual. He's not a big spotlight guy, but it's incredible that guy doesn't get more headlines, more content, more faces out there, because he's doing exceptional work this season with Philadelphia. And within that state, within that city, he has brought an enthusiasm, I think, back to that brand of football that they desperately needed. At seeing how things ended with the Carson Wentz, small era there. But man, this team is complete. And when you look at them, a couple weeks ago when Matt LaFleur was breaking down Dallas, Philadelphia to me is like an improved version of Dallas.
Yeah.
Defensively, they're kind of the revival. I like what they do because it's names. It almost reminds you of those mid-'90s Packers and late '90s Packers teams. You're going to see Fletcher Cox. You're going to see Hussein Reddick. You're going to see, their corners and Brandon Graham, all these guys. And offensively, with what Hurts brings to the table, again, he's not a guy that's going to burn you for 80-yard touchdowns but he just chips away. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And they have great playmakers. Devontae Smith is getting more comfortable. I mean, A.J. Brown, what a great trade that was for Philly. I remember when that first happened being like, Brown wants more action. He wants more passes. Is this going to be the right fit for him?
Right. Is that the offense that's going to deliver it for him?
It has.
And AJ Brown's the leading receiver on that team.
And for my money, I know he didn't have a great game against Indy, but Miles Sanders I think is one of the more underrated running backs this entire league. I mean, Packers undoubtedly have their work cut out for them on Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, by the numbers with Jalen Hurts, a 106.5 passer rating on the season through 10 games for Philadelphia. He's got 15 touchdown passes against just 3 interceptions. He's also the second leading rusher on the team behind Miles Sanders, as you mentioned. Hurts actually leading in rushing touchdowns. Sanders has 6, and Jalen Hurts has 8. You mentioned A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Those are his top 2 targets in the passing game. The number 3 target statistically in the passing game for Hurts, tight end Dallas Goedert is now injured. He's on IR, so they're digging into their depth chart there. But honestly, what impresses me more about Philadelphia when I look at the numbers is what they're doing defensively.
Yeah,
because this is a defense that has piled up 33 sacks and 13 interceptions in 10 games. I mean, you talk about high impact plays, the types of plays that change possessions and potentially change games. These guys have been doing it. Hassan Reddick, 7.5 sacks. Javon Hargrave, 7 sacks. Brandon Graham has 4. Those 3 guys right there, that's more than half of those 33 sacks. And then the 13 interceptions. C.J. Gardner-Johnson has 6. Darius Slay and James Bradbury have 3 apiece. Yeah. So that's 12 of the 13 interceptions right there coming from those 3 defensive backs. These guys are playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, and what we saw last year where Jalen Hurts and sort of this ground and pound offense, both with the running backs and the quarterback running the ball, that brought the Eagles back from, I believe it was a 3-6 start all the way to a 9-8 record to secure that 7th spot, that last wild card spot in the NFC. We've seen the defense. We've seen Philadelphia's defense take another step forward, and we've seen the offense go from just this ground and pound, wear you down. They can still do that, but then they can also hit you with the explosive play, which is what was missing from that offense last year. And that's the difference between where Philadelphia was a year ago and where the Eagles are now.
And again, like I mentioned with Hurts, I mean, he's only averaging 4 yards per carry. A lot of times when you see these scrambling type quarterbacks, it's because, they're 7.7 yards, some pretty crazy stats. But again, he's almost like a second running back in tandem with Sanders. And in credit to... I'd almost
like to figure out what his rushing average is if you take out the kneel downs, though. Because these guys have won a lot of games, and he's taken a lot of knees at the end of football games because they've had multi-score wins in a lot of their victories.
And the other thing, too, with this new coaching staff and everyone that's gone in there, I give them a lot of credit for committing to Sanders. That was one of the big kind of knocks on the end of the Doug Peterson era is they were running 18 different running backs.
Yeah.
There just really was no rhythm there. Sanders is the guy. Hurts is their quarterback, and they know who their weapons are. Obviously, right now they're playing without Goddard, but when you have a defense that's making as many plays as you said, and like you said, dude, Gardner-Johnson, 6 interceptions. We're in week 12.
Yeah.
I mean, just crazy numbers for their pressures, for their takeaways. When they have an offense that is as explosive, dynamic, and talent-rich as Philly is, there's a reason why they've been able to do what they've done so far this season. Now, For Green Bay, it's an interesting spot they're in because Philly had a complete letdown against Washington. A Washington team that, as the Packers found out themselves, cannot be trifled with. I mean, if you overlook them, if you don't give them the credit they deserve and respect they deserve, Ron Rivera is going to find a way to beat you.
Washington is now, after a 1-4 start, turning the keys over to Taylor Heineke. They've won 5 out of their last 6. They're suddenly 6-5.
Yeah,
and they're in last place in the NFC East, but they're 6-5, and they're right in the thick of the playoff chase.
And then you look at last week where Matt Ryan played clean football. Again, kind of been the hallmark of that season for them. Jonathan Taylor just not able to get really going for the Colts. But that was a close ball game, and Philly found a way to scratch and claw their way past it. For the Packers, I think what you have to learn to this is a fallible team. This is not some, 2011, 13-0 Packers squad here where you got to be fearsome. You have to play your brand of football. And as one of my big hallmarks, we both talked about complementary football with this week, but one of the big things I kept preaching in this is where the season's at right now. There is no more, hey, we got to play. No, you need to play complementary football. If you're going to beat the Philadelphia Eagles, 9-win Philadelphia Eagles, who have found every way under the sun to win ball games this year, you have to play complementary football. You have to play clean football, disciplined football, because you're going into their house. And this isn't the 2016 squad. Like, this is a different type of ball club that you're facing as opposed to when Run the Table started a couple years back.
Right.
You gotta be disciplined.
Well, and everybody's wondering, okay, so just how did Washington beat the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football? The game was in Philadelphia. Obviously, we all know the type of fan base, the crowd, the atmosphere that can exist in that stadium. Well, the bottom line is when the Eagles started the season 8-0, offensively, they had 3 turnovers in those 8 games, 3 giveaways. They had 4 giveaways against the Washington Commanders, and yet that was still a 1-score game right down to the final possession before it was decided. Washington was able to beat the Eagles because the Commanders were able to take the football away, and I think that's what the Packers are going to have to do. We've seen the Packers show some flashes of getting the takeaways, the fact that the defensive backfield, for the struggles that it's had, 3 interceptions in the last 2 weeks off of Dak Prescott and Ryan Tannehill. The Packers have got to find a way to take the football away from the Eagles, to give Aaron Rodgers and the offense some short fields that you hope in that complementary fashion they can capitalize on. The Packers are going to, at any point that the Packers have a chance to seize the momentum in this game, they're going to have to seize it, because this Eagles team is just too explosive, with too many high-impact players on both sides of the ball that they can take it back from you at any moment.
Well, let's go back to last week, too, against Indy. Indy leads that entire game.
Yeah.
Wasn't by a big margin
No,
at
but
all.
the Colts were on the plus side on the scoreboard all the way until the last minute and a half.
So what happens with 1 minute and 20 seconds left? They draw up a quarterback draw for Hurts. I mean, you have, I believe it was Miles Sanders, blocking on the play. It was just completely designed. Shotgun, run up the middle. And they zoned it out perfectly.
Yeah, there was nobody near Jalen Hurts. He walked into the end zone for the winning touchdown on a day that Philadelphia's offense had struggled and the Colts had played really, really good defense. But suddenly, when they had to have a play, they busted a play wide open. If they had run that play from the 35-yard line, he would have scored.
It was that much of an opening. So it just shows you that, again, this is a team, when you're sitting at 9-1, they're going to find ways to win ball games, even when things haven't exactly gone their way. They're not just going in there and blowing everybody out anymore. So as far as the Packers are concerned in this, gap discipline, being cognizant of where Hurts is, not allowing those 3rd and short opportunities, and again, as you were articulating as well, you get an opportunity, you take the ball away, that thing has to go up on the scoreboard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we go, Wes, I want to get your thoughts on what looks like a wildly entertaining slate of football on Thanksgiving Day. I mean, since the NFL...
I was hoping we were going to break down the Vikings and Cowboys, too, a little bit.
Well, we sort of lead into that because they're both playing on Thanksgiving Day as well. So looking ahead to a really good slate of 3 games on Thanksgiving Day also gives us a chance to reflect a little bit on what happened last weekend, because you have the Buffalo Bills going into Detroit, or should I say going back to Detroit, after having beaten the Cleveland Browns there on Sunday due to the massive lake effect snowstorm in Buffalo there off of Lake Erie. So Buffalo Buffalo righting the ship after a couple of losses. They get the win against the Browns. They're headed back to Detroit. But lo and behold, the Detroit Lions just went on the road and didn't just beat the New York Giants, but beat them convincingly by 2 touchdowns. I believe it was a 13-point margin was the final score, if I'm not mistaken. The Detroit Lions, there is going to be more energy and enthusiasm for a Detroit Lions home Thanksgiving game this week than I think we've perhaps seen in several years.
Well, and let's just be honest about this too, Mike. At least in my adulthood, can you think of a better slate of 3 Thanksgiving games?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, like, since they added the third game, the night game on Thanksgiving, where now you have one game in every television window on Thanksgiving, I can't think of a year where all 3 of the games had a really, really compelling storyline to them.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And seeing how Buffalo handles Detroit in this, Buffalo's worked through some stuff with Josh Allen. They've had to fight some adversity now too. But watching that offense go up against the Detroit defense that's had some issues at times this season, it's going to be really good to check out. And also seeing, how does the Lions fare? I mean, they've found something now behind Jamal Williams as
well, and you said it with regard to Detroit's running game and what they're doing with Jamal Williams. You look at the way the Packers ran the ball against the Buffalo Bills. One of the reasons the Bills lost that game to the Vikings, they gave up an 81-yard touchdown run to Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
Buffalo was the number 1 rush defense in the league until Green Bay came to visit, and since then, Buffalo's run defense has fallen off a cliff in some respects. And now here comes Jamal Williams, who leads the league in rushing touchdowns, coming at you to ram the ball down your throat. This is a really interesting matchup.
Yeah, and I think it also shows you, too, that if Detroit can get their defense figured out a little bit, the offense can get back to playing the way that I thought they were going to play going into the season, which was they have a really good offensive line. They had 2 healthy, good backs at the start of the season. You have someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown that can help you move the changes, more of a possession, versatile receiver. They're starting to look more like that team, even though Swift isn't healthy. But fantastic. I like what I've seen. I mean, I know Pack fans don't want to hear that, but I mean, Detroit, there's a reason why people are talking really highly of them right now, because they're starting to look like a team that can actually compete.
Well, and they're looking like a team in the second year under Dan Campbell, a team that is figuring out how to win. You have to learn how to learn how to win. You have to learn how to put teams away when you have the opportunity, and they did that against a pretty good Giants team on Sunday.
Which is fascinating, because if the Packers end up winning in that game at Ford Field, God only knows what happens in Detroit in terms of, maybe there wouldn't be coaching changes in that, but it was looking pretty bleak at that point.
Yeah, it was. Well, second game on Thanksgiving, you have the Dallas Cowboys hosting annually, as the Lions do, of course. But they have a division game against the New York Giants. And, of course, the Cowboys coming off of that shellacking of the Minnesota Vikings in Minneapolis, 40-3. Cowboys are riding high. They bounced back from the loss at Lambeau Field, something fierce. And now the Giants coming into Dallas for a big division game on a short week, but having lost at home, as we just mentioned, to the Detroit Lions by a couple of touchdowns. Big game in the NFC East with 2 teams that are coming off of drastically different results from just a few days ago.
I don't want to sit here and say this is going to be the lie detector test on the Giants, because the Giants have had a lot of injuries here mount up the last couple weeks.
Yes.
That being said, as I was talking about with you off camera a little bit, Giants, I think, have only played 1 division matchup so far. They're going to play the Cowboys. They still have yet to play Washington or Philly this season. They're going to get both of the Cowboy games out of the way already. So, for the Giants' perspective, this schedule is very daunting for them down the final stretch. Not just the in-division matchups, but also some of the other stuff they have to see as well.
But it's also a huge opportunity for them, because these teams, I mean, they're trying to fight off Washington from potentially stealing a wild card spot. They're trying to catch the Philadelphia Eagles. They have every opportunity they need in front of them to accomplish what they want to. As you said, they've had some injuries. Can they bounce back from that? Going to Dallas on a short week after the loss they just took, that's an awfully tough task.
If you're Mike McCarthy, my goodness, I can't even imagine what his post-game speech must have been, because it wasn't just that you ran the Vikings out of their own building. It was the response after a disappointing loss to the Packers in overtime. To be able to pull themselves back together like that, it's an exceptional job by Mike. It's an exceptional job by that coaching staff, because the Cowboys still, that's the Cowboys team that I was wondering, would you see that in Green Bay? And they definitely found themselves going in that game against Minnesota. They played ticked off.
Yeah. Well, then with Minnesota, the Vikings will be playing on Thursday night, on Thanksgiving night, against the New England Patriots. And Minnesota, you talk about having to turn the page quickly. You have your 7-game winning streak snapped by just getting absolutely bombarded by the Dallas Cowboys on both sides of the ball. Kirk Cousins is sacked 7 times. The defense is, giving up big play after big play. 40-3 is the final score there. Minnesota, this is a big time test for them, just in terms of their psyche, their mental fortitude, everything that had been going their way, including all the breaks that happened to win the game in Buffalo to keep that winning streak alive, and then it all came crashing down against the Cowboys. So how do they respond? And then meanwhile, you have a New England Patriots team that is climbing its way back into the playoff picture in the AFC, and they get into a defensive struggle, slugfest, whatever you want to call it, with the New York Jets, and then boom, in the last 20 seconds of the game, a punt return for a touchdown wins the game 10-3, and New England is going to be coming into this Thursday night game, riding almost as high as the Cowboys are, for their game.
We are going to learn so much about both of these teams, starting with New England, because the Packers have seen them this season. If you remember, Mike, they were the ones that kind of put together that first game plan to shut down Detroit, right? I mean, that was a T.J. Hawkinson just going off for points and touchdowns and everything, and then I think they held him like 1 catch for 6 yards or something when they met.
Yeah.
Now they're going to be taking on a team with Justin Jefferson and Hawkinson there. They're going to have some real weapons, but New England's defense looks very formidable. We talked as much as we did about Philadelphia, but the way that New England's defense has come on, they're going to be in a lot of ball games down the stretch, and they need to keep winning to stay in one of the more competitive conference divisions in the game right now. Minnesota's perspective, I said it in Inbox, Mike, I'll say it again. That did not surprise me, what happened with Dallas. Now, did I expect them to lose by 37? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that they dodged a lot of bullets this year when you look at Miami and Skylar Thompson starting that game. You're not having the 2 top quarterbacks for the Dolphins.
Anytime you win 7 games in a row and every single one is by a one score margin, that's you give them credit for winning the games they're going to win. But you also know that as soon as something starts to go wrong, it's possible that it could go really wrong, and that's what happened to them on that day. Their question is this just a bad day, or is this a sign of something going wrong down the stretch?
And this is what we're going to learn a lot about them and how they bounce back from adversity. But the fact that you give up, minus 37 in the points column, I think that brought them to, what is it, like +1 on the year, points for?
Yeah, it's almost dead even. They're an 8-2 team. They're an 8-2 team that basically has given up as many points as they've scored. So, a wildly entertaining Thanksgiving Day and night of football. It should be a lot of fun. We've gone a little bit of overtime today, but that's okay because it's our only show of this week. We certainly wish all of viewers, listeners, everybody out there a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the week, enjoy the holiday, family and friends, and football. It's what makes Thanksgiving a great day.
And
no matter and what Wes said too. So we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. We will continue to cover the Green Bay Packers. All the coverage that you want of the team will be there for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. See you next time.